Welcome back to an introduction to Python. In this second video, we'll talk about conditionals. We'll talk about conditionals and how to put together different kind of nested conditional using if, else if, and else. Then we'll talk about the ternary operator. So in Python, we use the reserved word if to begin a conditional block, and we use colon to begin the block, and then Python uses indentation to determine the block. And typically in the block you can have one or more statements, and the indentation is usually 4 spaces. That's a standard indentation, but Python is actually very flexible, so we stick with the 4 spaces because Jupyter Notebook actually uses 4 spaces as the standard indentation. So for example, I can have a variable x is 2, and then a conditional x, if x is bigger than 0, print x. And so if x is 2, then because x is bigger than 0, it will print out x. But if x is negative 2, then it will skip that conditional block. And then of course, the block can have multiple statements, so I can print out x is positive, for example. And so this is part of the same block. So for example, if x is 2, then it'll print x, and then it'll print out that x is positive. Now if I want to go back to the outside block, if I want to leave this if block, for example, if I would print out outside of block, notice that it prints out x, and then x is positive, so that's the block, and this is outside the block. So for example, if I put here negative 2, it will skip the entire if block, and it will just print out outside of the block. We can use a sequence of consecutive if statements, and these will be independent, so none of them or some of them or all of them can be executed. So for example, if I were to have a sequence of if statement like this, if x modulo 2 is 0, so this is when x divided by 2, if the remainder is 0, I mean that if x is even, then you print out the message x is even. Now if x is positive, I'll print out the message x is positive. Now if I were to say x is, for example, 3, then it only checks this if, and this is false, so it'll skip it. It'll check this if, and this is true because x is 3, which is positive. It'll print out this message. Now if x is even, say negative 6, negative 4, then x is even, but x is not positive, so it'll print out this message, but not this one. And of course, if x is both even and positive, then it'll print out both messages. And so if you have a series of if statements, then some of them, none of them, or all of them can be executed. So these are independent statements. Now an if statement followed by a sequence of elif statements will execute the first block whose condition is true, and then if no block is executed if all the conditions are false. So for example, say x is 7, if x is less than 5, I'll print out x is less than 5. Elif x is less than 10, I'll print out the message x is less than 10. And finally, if I put elif x is less than 15, and I'll print the message x is less than 15. Now so let's do some cases. If x is 2, for example, then all of these are true, but it will evaluate only the first one. So because this is the first one that's true, it will go into this and print out x is less than 5. It will skip the rest. So if I run this, then it will only print out this message. If x is say 7, then this is false, but both of these statements are true, so it'll only go into the first one that is true. So this one is the first one that's true, so it prints out x is less than 10, even though x is also less than 15. And then finally, of course, if you have only if x is 12, then only the last one is true, then it'll print out the last one. Now it's possible that x is say 25, in which case none of these are true, and so it'll skip through all the blocks. So all the blocks are skipped and nothing is printed. Now an if statement followed by a sequence of elif statements and ending with an else statement will execute the first block whose conditions are true, and if all the conditions are false, then it will evaluate the default else block, which is the last block. So for example, let's say x is 4, and if x is less than 0, we'll print out x is negative, elif x is bigger than 0, then print out x is positive. Then if we have an else, print, then in this case x is 0, x is 0. So notice if x is 4, then it's bigger than 0, so you print out x is positive. If x is negative 4, it'll print out x is negative. And if both of these are false, then it will default to the 0, the else case. So again, if you check each of these one at a time, and the idea is that the first one that's true will go into that block, skip the rest, and then if none of these are true, then it'll print out the default else. And so the only way so it's not possible to skip through all of them, right? Is that because there's always a default block at the end. This else block is the default block. And so exactly one of these blocks will be executed. We can use logical operators and, or, and not to simplify conditionals. For example, if you have this nested if statement, if x is greater than 0, if x is less than 10, print x. We can simplify this by using an AND operator. For example, if x is greater than 0 and x is less than 10, then print x. So this is equivalent to this nested if statement, but we use an AND to join these conditionals. And so this is a little bit cleaner and a little bit more concise than the nested if conditional. Then finally, I want to talk about the ternary operator, which is a little bit confusing, but it's actually very useful and very concise, and it's very readable once you understand the syntax here. And so we evaluate an expression based on the value of a condition. So sometimes this is called a conditional expression or an inline if-else statement. So let's do an example here. So suppose you have a score of say 70, say on a test or something. Your grade is is a string that is based on this score, and so I want to do an example here. So we're going to assign this grade the value of pass if the score is bigger than or equal to 60. So if this score is bigger than or equal to 60, it will have the value of pass. Else, it will have the value of fail. So if I run this and I print out grade, then I have the value of pass. But if I have a score of 50, then it will assign this the value of fail. So this is a conditional expression. Okay, great. So these are some good references. This is an online reference by Ryan Soklasky. This is a great reference. And then also this is a great book on Python. Again, if you go to my website, you can download this entire notebook with all the code, including some of the exercises from the notebook. Thanks for watching.